If we could rebuild mental health treatment from scratch, what would it look like? Welcome to Mind Amendment, the podcast that dares to challenge the ways that we think about mental health, physical health, addiction, and healing. Welcome back to Mind Amendment. My name is Patrick Custer, your host, and this is part 4 of my conversation with expert Trish Caldwell. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 3, I would encourage you to go back and watch or listen, as they are packed full of powerful transformational information. I'm so excited that each and every one of you are tuned in today and hope that you stick around for the full extent of this episode. Trish, welcome back.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to start off by posing this rhetorical question. If we could rebuild mental health treatment from scratch, what would it look like? So without answering that, my first question for you is, what's one outdated practice in treatment today that you would eliminate immediately? Following with that, I want to pose a story for you from our other podcast, Rooted Recovery Stories. We interviewed someone with a very powerful mental health recovery story this past year, and they referenced early on in their acuity of what was plaguing them. They were put into a primary mental health facility. And one of the things that they expressed to me was that they were put into EMDR immediately. And it caused a lot of struggle, trouble, triggered trust in the process, all the things. Mm-hmm. What is your feeling about that practice, why it works, how it works, and the timing necessary for it to be effective?
So I will say I am a fan of EMDR, but as we've been talking about this entire time, is timing matters. And so EMDR quite literally activates traumatic memories. That's what it's supposed to do, right? To create resolution, to be able to build resources for somebody to be able to manage through that. As we've said earlier, for an inpatient, the individual is in such early phases of their recovery that exposing them to a practice like EMDR, where they might be there for 3 weeks, you're exposing them to traumatic triggers at a time that they don't have the coping skills yet. And so this is where that question comes back. They were like, how do you know that they don't have the coping skills? I'm like, because they're in an inpatient, because we already know what their coping skills are. And so,
or aren't.
Yeah. So, yeah. And we know what they are, which is these are the ones that they're here to try and resolve.
Yeah.
Right. So exposing somebody before they have the ability, and EMDR does a foundational piece of building those resources, right? That's basically their attempt to try and help the recognition and the regulating. So for an inpatient, I think what this field has, in my opinion, misstepped is we do things that we want to do, whether or not it's in the best interest of the patient. And then we've created a narrative where we've got individuals coming to treatment asking for therapy. So this would be like, I have cancer and I go to the doctor and the doctor says, this is what we think you need to do. You need to have 8 weeks of radiation. Mm-hmm. And I say, I really just want 2. And the doctor says, okay, we'll do 2. Like, you wouldn't, right? The doctor would say, I hear you. We all would like to do that, right? But that's not how this works. And so that's what's happening. Patients are coming in and saying, I want EMDR, because what they want is to feel better. What they want is to not continue to engage in the behaviors that are interfering with their lives. Exposing them too soon to something that they are not going to be able to complete feels inappropriate to me, right? And then not measuring it. And so that's another piece that in this field, people talk about it as if it's a dirty word, right? Like, we're going to measure the work that we're providing our patients.
You mean, outcomes measurement?
Yeah. And not just like the outcomes. So the outcomes are like, did they improve, right? So a patient comes into our treatment facility, we do outcomes, and then they discharge and you do them again, right? That's outcomes. And I always say outcomes are for us. That's for us to be able to, as promises, to be able to say, our patients have improved in their depression by 80%. But to do like a measured-based care is to utilize those assessments to drive your treatment. Is this working? Because if somebody was exposed to EMDR and you did measured-based care, you would very quickly find out your patient is decompensating because their scores would get worse, not better. That's where we're missing it, right? So like, that's why it's exciting for me right now that we're trying to change the industry. Like, why are we not measuring this? Why are we not trying to go after best practices? Why are we not trying to improve our patients' outcomes when they say, between 40 and 70% of those that are struggling with mental health and substance use have a readmission and a reoccurrence? That can be true, but why are we not trying to improve it? Like, there's no other medical practice that sits on like, we just have this amount of reoccurrences, diabetes or anything else. They continue to search for like, what are the best practices that we give our patients the best opportunity to recover?
What do you think the why is behind that? That we sit with the status quo?
Because it's comfortable. Because I'm a therapist, and I say this all the time, because therapists like doing some of these practices, because therapists like the relational piece, right? And it feels good because you're going to say how much you like being around me. You're going to tell me like, I'm effective, Trish. Like, you're doing a great job, Trish. I feel so much better. But like, as a therapist, I need to be like, is it working when you're not with me though? And that is a shift for what we're taught. And I think also in fairness to therapists, I went to grad school. I was taught to be a private practice therapist. That's the reality. I supervised students from a university in Philadelphia, and they were coming in, and I'm like, we're not doing that. That is if you were in a private practice for a human being that is not needing our level of care. So our therapists are trained basically to go into the workforce, but not into an inpatient. And I think...
When you say our therapists, you mean generally when they go get their master's for counseling, what they're receiving is a high level training for a higher functioning individual. Yeah,
for somebody that's not in the earliest phases of their recovery. Right? So there's some things that we know work, right? So again, not to sound too like sciencey again, but there's like this idea of like hippocampus like neuroplasticity, right? Which is like the hippocampus is the part of the brain that like remembers things, right? So that's where like your learned behaviors and these kind of things. And so there's research to say like you can change that through skill development for restorative acts like better sleep and mindfulness and meditation, right? Rest, these things that can actually change the brain. The talk therapy, the processing of trauma too soon is not a part of it. And now we have an industry where individuals are coming into treatment saying, I just want to get rid of this. I just want to feel better. And when we co-sign that, the piece that bothers me the most is that then we have individuals that leave thinking they failed, right? And they didn't, right? So I don't want, this is a shame-based disease where people struggling with mental health and substance use feel they're failing. And that's our job to make sure that they don't feel that way. You talking about your trauma isn't going to resolve it. You can't take any of this away to then when you're at home by yourself and you're struggling with your thoughts, if you don't have something to be able to manage that, to regulate that, and you think it's me, then it's not sustainable. Right? And it wasn't that you failed. And so Marsha Linehan, who did DBT, she made it very clear about her practice of like DBT, you can't fail. Like this isn't about that. This is that you then weren't taught the right skills. You weren't given the opportunity, right? Or you chose not to do something, but you can't fail in it. And there's something very accountability holding to that. Stop blaming an individual who's not getting better when we're not changing the way that we're providing treatment. That's where that sits with me. Like, that's what makes me frustrated with this field. We're blaming the individuals that are accessing care.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. If every therapist, coach, or professional listening could implement one shift today, what would you recommend that it would be?
Pacing it. This is a marathon. And know where you are in the journey of training somebody to run a marathon, right? So if I'm a trainer and you come to me and you're like, I'm going to run a marathon, I don't start you immediately outside running an actual marathon, right? So if we can look at ourselves where we are we an inpatient, right? Are we in the outpatient world? Are we private practice? Because that's going to be the kind of trainer that you are, right? So if you're in an inpatient and you've got a patient that's like, I'm going to run a marathon, right? Called this thing called recovery. I'm like, I love that for you, right? I love this journey. And they're like, all right, I'm going to head out. I'm going to start running. And I'm like, no, you're not going to run. I'm like, that's crazy talk. Like, do you even drink water every day? No. You don't. Do you own a pair of sneakers? Because right now you're wearing flip-flops. And they're like, nope, I don't know. So my job is to prepare you. That's what my job is in an inpatient, to prepare you to be able to successfully run a marathon. Because what's happening is because we're doing all of this work in the inpatient, we're making you think that you've resolved your trauma in 30 days, which is absurd, right? We're making you think you did all these things. We've got patients that are leaving an inpatient, literally trying to run a marathon and then failing because you can't run a marathon in flip-flops, right? But like the people that were supposed to say like, Patrick, you need like sneakers and like you have to start drinking water and you have to stop drinking soda and you need protein in your diet. Like, it's shifting your role and understanding your purpose in that journey so that when the person goes to the next level of care, that trainer is like, okay, so now you have the sneakers, you've got the water, you know that you have to eat healthy. Let's start getting you out there and run, like walking a 5K. And let's start getting you to running a 5K. That's a shift for us because everybody right now is training it, like telling the patients they're going to run the marathon when they're done seeing them.
So I'm going to go a little bit more granular with this. And what I hear you saying is that first, what stuck out to me is that there's an ego check that needs to happen.
It feels good to be needed. And you go into the field because you want to help people. So I want to make sure that, right, we're humans treating humans.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate it, but this is a job that I will say for the rest of my life, this job requires unlimited humility. You have always got to check with yourself while you are doing somebody else's work.
What's the question that you continually ask yourself that you would recommend others also ask themselves so they don't remain stuck in what has always been?
Am I measuring it? And do I understand it? I do. I mean, I did research to just come here.
Yeah.
Right? To have a conversation about things that I already know. I think this is a field that you have to always be reading. Every day you need to be reading books, reading research, updated research, right? Like, we can't be doing treatment from 20 years ago. The patient profile looks different.
Might I remind all the people who are not just freshly out of, whatever age you are, 20, I'm going to hurt some feelings, 20 years ago, 2005. 2005 practices aren't okay to be what?
Yeah.
That was like yesterday.
It's crazy, right?
Yes.
It's crazy.
Okay, so the second thing I heard when you said that is the power and importance of being an effective resourcer, connector.
Yeah.
Do I have a library of professionals that I've vetted that I know are equipped appropriately for me to hand off to? Or I'm just going to go there. Or do I have a friendly relationship and one of the things they list on their Psychology Today profile is the thing that I need to refer my patient to next? Because there's the whole thing of having the humility to say, this is beyond me at this point.
Yeah.
I've got to refer up, out, or over.
Yeah, absolutely.
And appropriately.
Yeah.
That's the thing where I do have a lot of compassion for, because the work never ends, and it's not just with the patient. We're talking about so much behind the scenes work that you're not getting billed for.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you have any recommendations on like how you stay up to date on best practices for doing what I just was talking about, vetting other, resources and professionals that are supposed to, be your library of referral out?
There's enough research today that we're seeing, right? So there's enough research out there that's starting to show what is and isn't best practices for working with individuals. And again, know what level of care you're working with that individual. Things can look differently, right? So EMDR is incredibly effective in this one area and maybe less effective in this other area. I think asking the question, I grew up in this field. I've been in it so long that people used to say, like, if the patient was resistant to your treatment, it was the patient problem. I'm like, can't they just not like me? Like, I don't understand why we're blaming the patient. Like, they can just not like me. Like, it's just a weird dynamic. Like, sometimes it can be us. My style is not for everybody, right? But I think if you're looking for, treatment centers, if you're looking for therapists, know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right? If you're looking for a treatment center that you want to just feel safe in, right, and contained, then those are certain questions, right? Because safety is going to be paramount. But are you wanting to have a treatment center that's looking at measuring your outcomes, that wants to measure your improvement, that's going to use best practices, that guides and shapes their treatment, because that's what matters, right? Those are some of the questions that I think we should be asking, and the same for a therapist. Know if you want to have talk therapy, right? That helps to make you feel regulated versus I'm trying to change these behaviors, and so I need somebody that's going to help me to learn how to change these behaviors. And you can ask those questions that would guide you, right? You think of, 15 years ago, people in this field were literally telling people you have to hit rock bottom before you can find recovery, which is just a lie, right? Like, it's just a bold-faced lie. But that was the providers being like, if you don't want it, you can't have it. I'm like, I work with adolescents and young adults. None of them want it. And yet they're getting it because sometimes you just find recovery by the act of finding recovery. So to say that you don't want it, like, it's as stupid to me as somebody telling me, Trish, if you don't want to stop giving up sweets, you're never going to give up sweets. I'm like, I don't eat sweets. But I'm telling you right now, if I could eat a donut this second, I would eat a donut. I'm never going to not want it. So why would you tell me, so for people in recovery to tell them if you don't want it, it's such an outrageously punitive approach. Mm-hmm. And that was providers. You have to hit rock bottom. That's called dead, right? So we have to be humble enough to know that we are a field that is continuously looking for ways to be able to support humans. We are humans treating humans. We care about humans, but that's not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient. And so you need to do more work. You have to read. You need to be updated. You need to see what practices, because even as we talk about the regulation, right, there's research with that. There's a ton of research on CBT, but now there's research, and everybody ends it by saying more research needs to be done, right? That's what we're trying to do at Promises, right? We're tied in with the university. We're utilizing we want to be a part of the solution so that we change the industry, so that we're not just telling people you just need to want it to get it.
I want to be able to say that. I mean, I've been with our company now for, I don't know, I think almost 9 years, and I want to be able to. I have no plans of leaving, and
Good for you.
I want to be able to say that I was around and part of something that helped that percentage you mentioned in, I believe, part 3 or part 2, but talking about 40 to 70% of people either return to treatment or don't make it.
Yeah. And less than 20% are doing measure-based care.
Right.
You're like, we know the best practices and the field is still not choosing it.
Yeah. I'm excited to be able to say that we were a part of bringing that statistic down.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Trish.
Thank you.
This has
Appreciate being here.
This has been a huge honor to have you here and be able to have this conversation, our first conversation on mind amendment, and it has been so impactful, so powerful. The first of many. I said when walking onto this set how I got chills thinking about how much healing was going to happen here, and gosh, this has been a great start.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And so I've got something to say to those of you listening as well. We've got a multitude of different people in the audience, and so I'm going to address you separately and saying, for those of you professionals that are listening or watching, what is one thing you will change in your practice starting today that you can take away from this conversation? For the individual who's listening that just loves to take in self-help, betterment, whether it's physical or mental, what's the first step you'll take in recognizing, regulating, and responding differently? And if you just happened on this and heard a sound blurb that challenged anything in your belief system and said, oh, hold on, I got to watch this because that ain't right. Meaning the skeptics. What if you were wrong about healing? Have you been able to ask yourself that, or could you now? And let's go on that journey and see how we can all affect change in the position that we're given in this place in life. If you or someone you love is questioning whether treatment is needed, call or chat with us online at www.promises.com for an assessment. Take the first step and find out. This is your moment. This is your mind. What will you do with it? This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.